Welcome in here to Three True Values Big Board. We're here on a Tuesday talking with Jamie Shaw, our rivals expert. He breaks down all things basketball. He's on the recruiting trail. He's following these guys. He's been at a lot of events recently, so he's got all kinds of intel there. And he also just put out his first NBA draft big board for 2026. So we're going to break that down today. We're going to talk through some of his top prospects, and to get us into the conversation, to get us started here, Jamie, we've got to talk about last night's game between Arizona and BYU. So many prospects were in that game. And I think that game, those performances that we did see, could have a lot of impact on the NBA draft.
For sure, it was a fantastic evening of basketball. The appetizer being Louisville Duke, with the main course coming as Arizona BYU, and for the most part of that Arizona BYU game, it was one of those ones where it's just like, man, BYU's getting some great looks, but they can just get on track. They need to make a couple of them. Then all of a sudden, the last minute and a half, stuff started happening, and it ended up being a really, really good ending to the game. But just like you mentioned, so many NBA prospects. I think I heard him say 18 or so NBA teams were represented last night at the BYU game. And rightfully so. There's a lot of and we'll talk about this once we get to the draft board. Once you get past about the top 5 or 6, there's a lot of parity, a lot of questions. And you can have somebody that's not even in the first round jump to lottery. You can have somebody that's, firmly in the top 10 drop down the draft board. We see it every year, but this year I think it's a little bit more parity involved with a whole bunch of guys that are similar tiers with different skill sets depending on preference and all that stuff. So, every viewing counts. We're about 2/3 of the way into the season now. Every game counts. And last night was one of them that you check off the box when, every viewing counts.
Yeah, for sure. And we saw, of course, your number one prospect, AJ Dybantsa, in that game. Not his best performance. He still got up his numbers and was able to help keep BYU. I thought particularly down the stretch, he kind of got a little bit better. Yes, he missed some shots, but the intensity was there. We saw him making those little plays across the court. For Dybantsa, though, in last night's game, they take the loss. No shame in that. Arizona is undefeated still at this point in the season. But I think for AJ, if we're going to look at the good and the bad of last night's performance, like I said, the just activity level, the how involved in the game he seems to be is a clear positive for me. He's not a guy who's just out there getting up shots. He is playing defense. He is cutting through to the basket. He's going for rebounds, all the things you want to see him doing. But I will say the one thing last night that I was a little concerned with is the lack of separation that he has been
Just about to say the
creating.
exact same thing.
But I wonder, and I want to talk to you about, with the lack of separation, whether it is a lack of, not a lack of athleticism, but that he's not using the athleticism to create the space, or that he's so comfortable with that shot that he thinks he doesn't need space.
Yeah, so with him, I was going to say the one thing that really drew was the lack of separation. I 100% agree. I think a lot of that had to do, though, with possibly the collapse type of defense
Mm-hmm.
that Arizona was playing. He had obviously the man on him at all times. With obviously he was being guarded by about a man and a half, 2 guys every single time,
Yeah.
with the one main guy, and then the focus of the 2 guys that were around him, kind of halfway guarding. So if he went right, obviously 2 were on him at the one time. Went left, two came on, collapsed him on at one time. And the spacing just could not take care of having about a man and a half on him both ways he went throughout the entire course of the game. And with that, you saw that AJ struggled to create the separation. Usually once he drives hard right, drives hard left, and he's able to hit a reverse pivot or, use his footwork to create separation to get a clean look at the basket. This time, those clean looks at the basket were into a 6'8", 6'9" guy, that was walling up and not going
Right.
for the fakes. They played them straight up defense very well, and AJ struggled not only to create separation, but he struggled shooting the ball off movement too.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit concerning there. Coming down for a lot of pin downs, a lot of screens, and all that. Just the inability to knock down shots off of movement. So a little bit of concern there. I don't think that this is a game to where you knock him down any notches, because we have
Right.
4 years of data points on AJ Dybantsa. But nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
As clear cut number 1 pick as he is in this upcoming draft, there are some things that he's going to have to clean up. There are some aspects of his game that he's going to have to kind of somewhat figure out. Now go back to the drawing board, hit the film, work on counters, and figure that aspect out. You're going to see Arizona's again. They got Kansas coming up this weekend. You're going to see, as you get into the tournament, these teams that understand how to guard him.
Yeah.
Now, what's he going to do to counterpunch?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch because all these teams in the Big 12 have athletes. I mean, if you look at the Big 12, I mean, how many teams are ranked in the top 15 in the country right now? So there's no nights off from here up to the end. All these are, Hall of Fame caliber type coaches that they're going to be playing against that have athletes, that have draft picks as well. They know, they have seen how to guard the number one player possibly in the draft. And how is he going to counter that? It's going to be very interesting to see. But I agree with you too, also on the other side of things, when he was able to bring the passing aspect, pulling the gravity, spraying the ball, getting some open looks that sometimes they made, sometimes they didn't. The defensive aspect, getting in the passing lanes, the aggression that he brought there as well. But yeah, the lack of separation was concerning to see. It'll be interesting to see how he counters that moving forward.
Yeah, I am curious. The one thing that I noticed and what I was seeing, yes, and they were bringing the second defender to him, but I think part of what was allowing the second defender to be as impactful as it is that AJ, at times I feel like he's almost too comfortable with that mid-range turnaround. I think that when he's not necessarily creating space because he just knows I can just spin around and shoot this. And as he faces, like you said, bigger, stronger defenders as he gets through Big 12 play and then of course into the NBA where they will be even better defenders. I think he is going to have to work on take that extra step into the lane before you come back rather than just turning and facing up to the basket. That's one of those areas where, like I said, I don't think that it's a lack of athleticism that's stopping him here. I think that he's not using his athleticism. He's almost too comfortable with his ability to shoot over the top.
Well, and along with that too, if you notice a lot of the shots that he took, the ones that were in the mid-range, now he was getting balled up at the rim and
right.
But the ones in the midway, he was getting clean looks at the rim. He just missed the shots.
Yeah.
A lot of those times, a lot of those opportunities, the elbow pull-ups of the reverse pivot fadeaways that he makes when he gets 43, he missed them last night.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen sometimes.
Yep. Braden Burries. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Braden Burries, he did have a big performance, and he's a guy who has shown up in some big games and put up some big numbers. Consistency seems to be the key for him. Can he consistently go out there and maybe not get into the high 20s up into the 30s, but can he put together 16 points every game instead of 23 this night and then 10 the next night? That's all I'm looking for him, because we were talking about last night while watching the game. He looks the part. All of his moves seem like they contribute to the next level. On the ball, he looks pretty comfortable. I really like the potential that he's showing. Now, can he translate it through the rest of the season more and more consistently, game in and game out?
Coming in with this Arizona team, what you saw was an interesting mixture of Euro international players coming in, returning players, and highly touted freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
The returning players being the Toby Awakas of the world, the Krivas of the world, the Jaden Bradleys of the world.
Yeah.
They have their established what they are as a team and their expectations. Then you had the internationals coming over with Krechnikov, and then you have the freshmen coming in, Koa Pete getting all the highlights and everything too. A lot of personalities, a lot of guys that are talented, a lot of guys that have expectations coming together. Braden Burries, even though he was the highest ranked player incoming freshman in that class, didn't necessarily have the headlines of the local, Koa Pete, 4 FIBA gold medals, state championships, top 10 player, all that stuff from locally at Arizona. Burries didn't have all that. It took him a little while to gain his footing, to kind of get his role within the team and the construct as to what it was. And we saw that early on. Now, over the last 13 games, he's led them in scoring 6 times, including the 29 points last night. It seems that he's really finding his comfort within the team of being that connecting piece who can also finish plays. When you look at him, what I liked about him so much coming out of high school, while he was, I think, 6 or 7 for us in the final 2025 class rankings, was the big, strong physical frame that he had at 6'5" or so, long arms, but his ability to dribble, shoot, and pass to an advantage. He's very comfortable as a secondary initiator, making the reads as you reset the offense and being the first pass away and then running some offense. But he's also very comfortable knocking down shots. He's very comfortable attacking the basket, finishing at the rim. He's also can play multiple spots on defense, gives effort, guarding the ball in the passing lanes and all that. So there's just a lot of stuff that he's able to do there. A lot of he seems to be finding that comfort level within this stacked team. This is one of the most deep teams in college basketball. Every position, they have multiple guys that they can come at you with different looks, different stuff like that. You're finding Braden Berry's consistently now, as I said, 6 of the last 13 games he's led them in scoring. You're finding Braden Berry's consistently being able to be a guy that they run their offense through, and he's able to finish plays as well as start plays.
Right. And there's plenty more guys in this game that we could talk about, that we could break down, but we got to get to the big board. And so I want to talk about that. I want to kind of shift the conversation there. AJ Dybonsa, as we mentioned, your number 1 player. Darren Peterson is at number 2. Cam Boozer at number 3, kind of going down. I'm interested in this next tier with Caleb Wilson and Kingston Fleming. We know that the hype around this draft has been about the big 3. We've had conversations about, well, how deep does it actually go? How close are we to a top 4 and then really to a top 5 in this draft class, in your vision of how many elite prospects we have?
So I think right now this draft class has a top 5, quite possibly a top 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think the tiers are AJ Dybonsa, number 1 by himself, Darren Peterson, number 2 by himself. And I think the third tier happens to be those next 3 or 4 guys. When you have a Cam Boozer, when you have a Caleb Wilson, when you have a Kingston Flemings, and then quite possibly Nate Ament.
Right.
We'll see how Nate Ament continues to move forward. His last 4 games, he's been really good, culminating with the 29 points he had this past week, which kind of gave us a glimpse as to why he was so highly ranked coming in. There's still a lot of upside there. There's still some question marks there. We need to see that continued consistency. But right now, he is penciled in that number 6 with the possibility to climb into that next tier. But for me, the tier that's interesting is the Boozer, Wilson, Kingston Flemings tier. Boozer just is what he is. He's a force. You see what he does every single game in, game out. But you also see that from Caleb Wilson. Caleb Wilson does have more double-doubles than Cam Boozer does. Cam Boozer, a central hub, passing force within the offense, able to be the first pass off the ball and run your entire offense through and get people open. The gravity that he pulls in the college game is just second to none. His understanding of angles and leverage and the strength, ability just to kind of go straight through somebody. He's been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And even with that high floor, lowered ceiling that he has, you see what a Caleb Wilson does when he's all ceiling. You're seeing the production that he has with the athleticism and the length, the ability to guard all over the floor, the ability to create offense and be a better passer than expected, the ability to straight line drive toward the basket and everything. A taller player, a longer player than Cam Boozer, a more athletic player than Cam Boozer, doesn't quite have the feel that Cam Boozer does, but who does? So that's going to be interesting as a preference point with those two. But then sneaking into the conversation is Kingston Flemings.
Yes.
And how sneaking into the conversation is positional value. Gone are the days where NBA teams are looking for starters that are sub 6'4".
Mm-hmm.
Be able to win at the point of attack consistently on both ends of the floor, touch the paint, collapse the defense, make a play, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much that goes into starting caliber NBA point guard. Kingston Flemings, long arms, listed at 6'4". He's probably the best point of attack point guard, possibly in college basketball, up there with like Tyler Tanner, who's 5'11", so not really in the same NBA conversation. But at the top of this NBA draft, he's probably the best point of attack guard on both ends of the floor. Incredibly disruptive on the defensive end with the hands and quick feet and passing lanes, but also you can't keep him out of the paint. He lives in the paint. And you're seeing him be able to make the reads, whether it's the pull-up jump shot, which he's mastered, whether it's getting all the way to the basket and finishing at the rim, whether it's spraying to the corner or hitting the open man. But what you're seeing is the positional value of a true point guard, 6'4" plus, ability to dictate the play at the point of attack. And just how many over these last couple cycles have we seen point guard, starting playoff caliber point guards come through the draft classes? There hasn't been that many of them come up. Kingston Flemings checks the box as a starting caliber NBA point guard this coming through. And if the NBA teams go through their intel and they like what they see with that, the value in that, while these other guys could be better players, all that, the value in having a possible playoff starting caliber point guard this young rookie contract on your roster is incredibly valuable. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that tarries into the draft moving forward. And then obviously you have Dement, who could sneak his way in if he continues to play like he has his last couple games, could sneak his way into that conversation as well.
Yeah, Fleming is just so fascinating within this conversation. I feel like we've touched a lot on those top three guys. We've touched on Wilson quite a bit throughout the season and his pros and cons, even Ament entering the season, all the potential that he has. But he's just slowly crept his way up into this conversation by just being consistently a force when it comes to winning at a position that, like you said, a lot of value there when everything comes together. And I think that's the interesting part, because there's definitely going to be teams that look at a point guard and say, we just aren't going to draft him that high because look at all the other point guards who have no trade value around the league right now. And now he's not one of the small guards like those guys are. He brings the defensive value that really adds to that plate and makes him more and more valuable. But if you look at the recent point guards who have been drafted at the very top, they're 6'8". They're not even when we talk about 6'3" is kind of the cutoff of where we start to talk about smaller point guards, at least in today's way of looking at things. And so 6'4" is still within the realm. We still see plenty of 6'4" guards who are having a lot of success. But to take that really top of the draft swing, we've seen it be a higher standard for what the height these teams are looking for. And so just really interesting for me to see how high he can go up in here, because the production, the kind of projection, the overall value on both ends, it's all undeniable. And so at some point, he's going to have to be up here towards the top of this conversation, particularly for a team that needs a point guard.
No, for sure. It's going to be interesting. You know, we saw a couple years ago when there was actual conversation between Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama at the top of that draft. You know, obviously hindsight being 2020, that, you know, while it was happening in real time, there was actual conversation there. You know, there's incredible value of a point guard that you believe in, a guy who's going to have the ball in his hand the most, the guy that's going to be making a majority of the decisions almost every single play on the guy that's going to be able to guard at the point of attack and kind of slow things up for the other team, or at least disrupt a little bit. There's a lot of value in a guy that you believe in with that. Mm-hmm. And if these teams do fully believe in what Kingston Flemings brings, there could be, you know, you look at John Morant in his draft, or, you know, just these point guards that you believe in, they get a bump. It's almost like the quarterback in football. They get a bump. If there's a team that believes in Kingston Flemings like that, if he continues to do what he does, obviously he's going to test off the charts when it comes to the intel. He's going to be off the charts when it comes to the interviews and all that stuff. And you turn the film on, you see that he can't stay out of the paint and all this stuff. If there's a team that believes in that needs that wants that, there could be a real world where he jumps in quite possibly even the top three of this draft, you know, just because of the positional favor that the point guard position brings.
Yeah, I want to talk about number 7 on your board, Keaton Wagler. He had a huge weekend that definitely helped out his case. 40-point performance, just scorching hot from 3. A guy who came in unheralded, was not high up in any of the rankings. Even Brad Underwood has talked about not really realizing quite what he had when he first got there, and now he is emerging into a star. But I'm curious with Wagler just how high up he can go, because these kind of unknowns coming into the season, I'm always fascinated by, because you talked about with AJ earlier on in this same show. Oh, okay, well, last night's performance is fine because we have 4 years of data. We've been watching him do this forever. With Keaton Wagler, these NBA teams are kind of searching through their notes and realizing they've got 1 or 2 games of data, not 4 or 5 years of data like they do some of these other prospects. So how does that impact the evaluation process here?
Well, on the plus side for Keaton Wagler, he played, you know, I think he was the Kansas State Player of the Year this past year, state championships. He also played alongside Ethan Taylor in high school. So I would have to assume a lot of these NBA teams had seen him play in high school prior to coming into this season. Now, when it comes to that, he was in a completely different role on his high school team, primarily on the ball, you know, doing all that. Where he's thrived with his Illinois team, well, it's kind of twofold. One, he's the first pass away. So, you know, you have Kylan Boswell or whomever it is initiating the offense primarily. Keaton Wagler was the first pass away where he's able to make a read, make a play out of that first pass.
Right.
So he's the secondary type of initiator. He's shown really good feel of getting off the ball, but he's also shown confidence. He's shown the ability to knock down shots, create space, knock down shots, play within the holes of the defense to find advantages. And he keeps getting better.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting better. He's able to find his role in between veteran college players, Kylan Boswell, Stojakovic, older players, Merkovich, Ivisic, all those guys that are on the roster in Illinois. He's able to find his role within that, being the first pass off the ball and making plays, taking advantage of his one-on-one opportunities, and continuing to get better to where he's emerged as being the fifth option to now being the second, a lot of times first option on a very good high-powered team that runs really good offense. So a lot of times rookies, freshmen hit the wall. He hasn't hit a wall.
No,
what he's done is he's continued to ramp up and get better, more comfortable.
Yeah.
Seeing that within a 20-game frame, now we got 10 more games coming with, 10 or so more games, depending on how far they go in the playoffs and all that stuff. But what you're seeing from him is a guy who has a high IQ. He has a high feel. All those on-ball reps, regardless of if he was loose with it in high school, the on-ball reps allow him to have a lessened secondary role and be able to focus on creating the advantages off the ball like he has been. He's been fantastic. Like, number 7 overall here. You really like his ability to play in the gaps, provide the spacing, pull gravity in a real way, but also have the ball in his hands and make a read, be able to create advantages for others as well on his team. And you kind of like that, if you're getting past the guys, the aged advances, the Darren Petersons, the Caleb Wilsons and all those that can be primary focus, potential all-star type of guys. Those guys need to have gravity around them. Those guys need to be able to have guys around them that can create advantages for them, help put them in advantageous spaces and all that stuff. And Keaton Wagler's at the top of that list of somebody who sees the game well. He processes the game quickly. He can knock down shots. He can put the ball on the floor for a couple dribbles and create space there. And there's just a lot to like of somebody who just continues to get better within the role.
Yeah, Wagler is a guy that I'm kind of excited as we get further and further into this process to see how he compares and how the coverage of him compares to that of Cedric Coward last year. Obviously, Coward was an older player. He came from Division II up into college basketball and then didn't play throughout the year. That's why he was kind of that unknown that just miraculously seemed to rise as we got more and more intel. Keaton Wagler, of course, is on the court. We're seeing big performances from him. But I think it's similar in that to the average fan or even to the person who's not scouting this daily, he was a complete unknown. Suddenly we're seeing big performances. We're seeing people talk about him in a way that suddenly we're trying to project forward. Well, if he was this 1 or 2 years ago, right? If he was a guy that only Washington State recruited, if he was a guy that Illinois was really the only high major offer that he was seriously considering, and now he's this good, how much better can he get? How much more room is there for growth because he's made such a leap in such a short amount of time? That's what I'm looking for, the comparison that I'm interested to see. How many of these quote unquote smart franchises, these smart front offices that we look at in the draft, I feel like they're the ones that are going to get linked to Wagler because they're the ones that aren't afraid to say, hey, maybe no one had the right evaluation on day one with this guy, but he has grown so much that we think we can continue that growth trajectory into this next stage of his career.
Yeah, looking at one of your guys, Jalen Wells.
Mm-hmm. Jalen Williams with the Oklahoma City Thunder, another guy who was in that same mold, just kind of popped up out of nowhere and suddenly was rising.
But yeah, we'll see with him. The two things with Jalen Williams and Cedric Coward were the physical traits that they brought.
Right.
This unreal length with strength and all that type of stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see what Keaton Wagler actually measures at, both when it comes to weight and wingspan wise, and just all the measurements and all that type of stuff too. But the film on the court, which is kind of why I said Jalen Wells, the film on the court is the stuff where you can see a plug and play type situation with a guy who plays with an alpha lead guard or an alpha point forward type of situation to be able to play off the ball, secondary initiate, and pull some gravity as a shooter and all that stuff. He's going to fill out. Still young, still immature physically when it comes to that. But there's a lot of interest there. I'll tell you, man, from that 6, not really 6. I think Nate Ament's pretty firmly at 6 right now, depending on and he can move up or down. 7 up until on down the list it could be just a dart throw as to where things are at right now. The last from now until July will be very big for that seven on
Yeah.
category. I mean, you have guys going in there, the Koa Pete's of the world,
Mm-hmm.
the Michael Browns of the world, Darius Acuff, Chris Sinek, even going on down the list with guys like a Braden Berries. How do they play their way up or down these lists going in? Thomas Howell. How do they play their ways up and down the list? Because visually you absolutely see question marks, but then the value of what they bring positively, how do you weigh that in against one another? When it comes, it's going to be fascinating to watch from now until July how things shape up from that 7 range all the way down to
Yeah.
20, 25 or so.
Right. I do want to talk about one of those guys towards the bottom of that range that you just mentioned, but we've only got one game of data on him, at least at the college level. Elijah Arenas, who of course
Yeah.
reclassified, went through all kinds of off-season stuff that just derailed what I was very excited about. Had him in my way too early mock right after last year. I thought he could pop up into even the lottery of this year's draft. But you've still got him in that first round range after just one game. Of course, it wasn't an efficient performance, but he's still getting his legs under him, still figuring things out. It appeared, though, to me from that game that we saw, that early performance, that he's going to get a high usage rate, which would lend itself to, if he can get his legs under him, can get back into basketball shape quickly, he could really make a run back into this NBA draft conversation with just half of his freshman year.
For sure. Yeah, no, he's somebody that people know that, the notebooks have been made on him. And NBA teams are aware, obviously, given his dad, Gilbert, playing in the league. Elijah, this past summer, not this summer, but the previous summer, had a really good, played 17U, on the Adidas circuit, played alongside Koa Pete, and all those guys had a lot of eyes on him, and he was very good. That kind of started to build his trajectory, and then coming, I believe, in January last year, he reclassified up into this class, ended up being a McDonald's All-American, had flashes during that McDonald's All-American week. So when you couple what he did on 17U on the Adidas circuit with the flashes he had during McDonald's week and the postseason All-Star stuff, there's a lot of anticipation with him coming into USC this year. Obviously, the car wreck and then the injury, all that stuff has kind of set it back a little bit, but there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that he has in his game when it comes to naturally being able to score the basketball, feeling comfortable in the mid-range, especially putting the ball on the floor, getting to his spots. He's got positional size and length. He's just now starting to come into his confidence.
Mm-hmm.
As that confidence continues to grow, the skill set's there. And it looks like, as you said, the usage is going to be available for him at USC with Musselman, who obviously previous NBA coach, who's also had guys in college go get drafted and have NBA careers and do all that stuff as well. So he knows kind of what that looks like also. It's going to be fascinating to see. I put him where I did, because that's a spot to where he could, if he shows that he needs to come back another year, he can easily slide down.
Yep.
But if it pops, he can easily slide up.
Yep.
So that's just kind of a placeholder spot, expecting him to move in one direction or another throughout the course of this year. Betting on the upside that he is an NBA talent, but also understanding the fact that he did reclassify up. He was playing, public school California basketball previously, and there's going to be a little bit of a time to slide into the confidence level of being a go-to guy in college. But the talent's absolutely there.
Yeah, I definitely I like that spot for him. Like you said, easy to slide him up, easy to slide him down, depending on what we see with a larger sample size than just 1 or 2 games, fresh off of an injury, trying to come back and make an impact for a team that's down some guards in addition to his previous injury. So he's going to come in there, and it's not just that they want to get him those extra reps. He needs those reps to be a driving force for their offense. One guy that I want to touch on here before we wrap up is Henry Veesaar. I know that you've been high on him throughout this process. He transferred from Arizona into UNC. Some good results, and I think some good and bad to break down.
Yep.
but he's in the first round conversation here in your top 30. So what has him higher than some of the other centers that just missed this cut?
Well, looking at Vsar, he was firmly penciled into that 25 range, and then the Virginia game happened. He was not
Mm-hmm.
very good at Virginia. Showed kind of a lot of stuff there. There's question marks when it comes to the foot speed, question marks when it comes to the rebounding aspect. But then you see the offensive skill that he has, the ability to stretch the floor, the legitimate size that he has. The legit 7 feet, good length, and very skilled. The passing acumen that he brings. There's a very real possibility where you watch Henry Vsar play, and he plays in the league for multiple years moving
Mm-hmm.
forward, finding roles and continuing to find spots in lineups. Going to need to get stronger. Going to need to embrace the physicality a little bit more. But there's just something there that he brings, being able to pull the gravity, stretch the floor, and make a play with the ball in his hands as a legit 7-footer. That brings a lot of value. That brings a lot of intrigue and understanding as to a baseline of what he could be as an NBA type of player with those other things added on. So, look at these other guys. There's a whole lot more question marks and stuff surrounding what he brings at the highest level of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But with Vsar, you see the ability to not only stretch the floor with the shot, but the ability to make a play with the ball in his hands at multiple levels in the half court. Run some offense through some high-low stuff, some passing acumen that he brings, the ability to read soft spots in the defense and when to break to the basket, and all that type of stuff. The feel that he has naturally, pretty intriguing when it comes to a guy who's legitimately 7 foot tall,
Yeah.
looking toward his futures to as
Right.
he continues to fill out and grow more as a player.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the difficult things on creating a big board is that we understand when you're picking in this 25 to 30 range, you're not always looking for the home run. Oh, well, he's got a 5% chance to become an all-star. You're looking for somebody who can go out there and play with a team that either won or almost won the title last year. So you want somebody who
Yeah.
can come in and make an impact. He doesn't have to be a superstar. He can come in off the bench and just provide you some minutes. That's really the difference there. So you end up with kind of a split early on. Obviously, you're looking for big potential. Later on, you're looking for somebody who's a little bit more plug and play. Vsar, interested to see too how his defense develops because that's been a sore spot for this UNC team. Sometimes it's hard to tell though with the centers, the bigs in particular, forwards and centers, how much is what they need to work on, which I think there's definitely some of that in his game, versus not getting as much help from the guards. And when you're having to contest every shot and you're having to step up to the guard who's entering the paint, sometimes that big ends up behind you and gets the open dunk. So interested to see how his defense continues to develop as well.
Yeah, no, without question. Yeah, I did. No, I agree, and that's a big, and that was exploited this
Mm-hmm.
past weekend at Virginia.
Yep.
With that, so when Virginia has two older bigs that are very physical, um, you know, he wasn't at his best. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see how that does moving forward too. But the offensive side of the ball, I think he brings a lot to the table. It's very intriguing in the way the game is played at the NBA level.
Yep. Who was your most difficult cut from this top 30 here? Because I know that's a struggle for me when we talk about trying to put together just 30 on a list, and you've got a tier break that might go past that number. Whether it's guys who are really similar at the same position, or just a guy who you like, but there's just not room for him right now on your board. Was there anybody that stood out that you were like, man, I wish I could get him on here, but I'm at 30?
Yeah, so my five guys that I was looking at that were kind of just off the list that I had next: Ibuka Corey,
Mm-hmm.
Ade Mara, Tyler Tanner. Then I had Alex Caravan and uh, Ryan Conwell Damesar. So those
Yeah.
are the next guys that I had written down. Trying to find a spot to go in there. Obviously, with Ibuka, smaller shoot first guard that's been electric but also inefficient. Tyler Tanner, 5'11" guy at the point of attack. Just where does that fit? Dame Sar, his inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Couldn't really overlook that. Ryan Conwell, I like his game. I think he's a plug and play guy that's going to find a role in the league. Not entirely sure. Ade Mara, he's just fascinating.
Yeah.
He's just somebody that I'm just going to have to really dive into the film. Loved him coming out. Loved him coming out. I guess coming into college.
Right.
Um, love the passing acumen that he brought at
Yeah.
7'3". He's been kind of loose with it on the offensive end this year, and kind of a sneaky good defensive player.
Hmm.
Um, so good. He's going to be a fascinating one as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, those are kind of guys that I that were just off for me. What about you? Who are some guys that are just off your 30?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Alex Caravan there,
And then
and
Caravan, yeah,
I've joked many times that he's perennial number 30 on my board.
yeah,
He would have a first round grade from me, but I see why he keeps going back to school, why he keeps going back for another season there at UConn. So he's definitely one that I have in that mix. Another one that I'm really interested in. Uh, Kind of his development forward, and he's had an injury recently, so we haven't gotten to see him, is Amari Allen. He's looked better and better as I've seen the season go on for Alabama. Continues to take on a bigger role. I think that his versatility, plays the four, but he's mobile enough. I think he's got enough to him that in a big lineup he could maybe play the three a little bit. So I want to see that kind of develop throughout the rest of this season and see how he continues to make an impact. He's another one of those guys that I put him in a spot where I'm trying to keep him right there so that I can move him up if he's good the rest of
yeah.
this way, or if he needs to come back, he can definitely do that and have a great season in college basketball next year.
No, for sure. He's an interesting player. He was always interesting in high school too. Transferred down from Wisconsin as a sophomore down to IMG as a junior. Couldn't quite find his footing at IMG as a junior. Transferred
Mhm.
back up to Wisconsin as a senior. Um, I think he played on the Under Armour circuit with the Wisconsin Playground AAU team, possibly. He was a ball in hand guy a lot in high school. A lot of initiation stuff, bringing up the floor, and showed some passing stuff. It was a little bit loose with kind of positionally what he was, and the shooting aspect of his game was never necessarily there. But there's a lot of connecting pieces.
For
He's
sure.
got that size with the connection part. He's got the passing acumen, the processing defensively. Um, he's got the upside there as well, able to
Yeah.
slide, get in the passing lanes, be aggressive there. So yeah, Amari Allen's a very fascinating one, and I know the Alabama staff loved him.
Yeah.
Even in the offseason, they're talking about him possibly being a one and done.
Yep. That'll do it for us here today on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Three True Values Big Board. We'll be back with more content.
I know.